You're listening to the Color Country Podcast, your passport to the breathtaking public lands and tourism destinations nestled in southern Utah and northern Arizona. Join host Stephanie DeGraw and her guests.
My name is Bruce Grubbs, and I'm the author of a Falcon Guide, 101 Classic Hikes of the Southwest. I've lost track. Something like the 24th or 25th book I've done for Falcon Press over many years. So this is just the latest project.
Thank you so much for being my guest today. What inspired you to write 101 Classic Hikes of the Southwest?
It's interesting because I've had ideas for several books along that line over the years, none of which actually got anywhere. And then they approached me with the idea of doing a kind of an overview book of the southwestern states. So since I'd already thought of something like that before, so I jumped at it. It was my editors that thought of it, but as soon as they said, "Hey, are you interested?" I said, "Oh yeah."
Absolutely. And yourself, your background, have you been much of a hiker in your life? Were there any particular hikes that you really wanted to share?
Well, I've been involved in the outdoors my whole life. Didn't actually start hiking and backpacking until after we moved to Arizona when I was 14. I was actually raised in Alaska, and my parents were into hunting and fishing. And so, yeah, I've been in the outdoors since I can remember. But once we moved to Arizona, first I hated the desert. I thought it was really ugly. And then I got out and started rock hounding with my parents. And I realized, wow, it's gorgeous out here, at least when it's cool. So I got into hiking and backpacking pretty seriously. And that's the one thing I've done all my life. I'm not doing as much of it now as I'd like to. More day hikes. I really do like backpacking though. I also cross-country ski, rock climb, mountain bike, kayaked. But of all the things I've done in the outdoors, hiking and backpacking's my base. That's what I always come back to, never give up on.
How did you select the hikes featured in your book? Were there any kind of criteria that you put towards choosing those hikes?
That was the hardest part of writing the book. I mean, as I've said, I'm a veteran of writing hiking guides and outdoor guides. So, but trying to basically eliminate nearly all the hikes that could possibly be in the book, that was the hard part. What I wanted was, and working with my editors, we had the same vision, is to pick the cream of the crop of the states that the book was going to cover, but also at the same time try to stay away from, you might say, overhyped hikes. So you want people to have really good experiences, but you also want to give them something that's a little off the beaten track without getting into something that would be, for experienced hikers only. Because one thing that's been pretty certain through my hiking guidebook career is that most of the people buying hiking guides are either beginners or they're new to an area. And you want people to have fun right off the bat. So I basically picked the classic hikes and in each area, and then narrowed it down from there. Like I said, trying to make it just a little bit different and not just nothing but the best known hikes, I guess is a way to put it.
Can you share some of your tips for hikers exploring the trails in your books? Any kind of gear you might recommend or safety precautions?
That's a great question, because a lot of people think, okay, hiking is just walking. I walk every day. I can do this, right? That's pretty true if you're on a really popular and easy trail with lots of people around that's fairly short. You really don't have to worry too much about gear, just basically having comfortable shoes. But if you start doing longer hikes, getting further away from the crowds and more into the backcountry, which is the part I like, is being able to get off the roads and away from the crowds. You should take equipment a little bit more seriously. There's a concept that's been floating around for decades called 10 essentials. And I won't go over the list. It's all you have to do is Google it. But that's a recommendation to not just walk out with no gear at all. Especially in the Southwest, water is the number one thing you should have, probably about twice as much as you think you should have. Because dehydration, illness is the most common problem that Southwestern hikers have. Even in the cool weather, the air is dry and you dehydrate pretty quickly. So water is number one. few snacks so you don't start running on empty if your hike goes longer than you think. And I strongly recommend for anything but a really well marked, short, easy trails that people carry a map of some kind. There's excellent maps available now for recreation. And a lot of people just use their phone for a map, but phone batteries die and you get out of cell phone range and have it download as your map. All of a sudden, you don't have a map. Plus, I just love maps. It's fun reading them and figuring out where you are. And it lets you find a lot of stuff that you'll never know about if you don't have a map. And then if you're going to carry a map, you might as well throw a compass in your fanny pack or day pack or whatever. You won't need one very often out here in the Southwest where you can see for 100 miles. But when you do need one, you'll need it badly.
So true. So true. And how about hiking gear and just maybe even the thought I have of how I bought some new hiking shoes, but I didn't break them in. So, of course, I had a lot of blisters. Any recommendations you have on the kind of shoes you should use when you hike?
Well, I've always been a fan of lightweight hiking shoes. I've never liked heavy leather boots, which when I started backpacking were the rage. Is big, heavy mountaineering boots that you could split rocks with. I've never liked that. So I've always used lightweight shoes. I'm really glad to see that the market is just flooded with really good lightweight hikers and a lot of good brands. I recommend going to an outdoor shop that specializes in hiking because they know how to fit hiking shoes. Whether it's a low cut shoe or an over the ankle shoe isn't so important as long as it's comfortable and fits well and you have plenty of toe room. That's probably the mistake most people or a lot of people make that are starting out is they're used to street shoes and they get their shoes too short, too tight. That cramps your toes and that leads to lots of blisters. You need a comfortable fit and toe room, and a good shop will have space where you can walk around and even a little ramp you can walk up and down to simulate going up and downhill.
That's a great idea. I'm a big online shopper, so I think that's great. I'm going to have to go into a store and make sure I'm getting the right pair next time. We mentioned that when you have, your phone, your battery might die and you might not even have cell service at all. What about GPS compatible maps and things like that? If you don't have access to the cell service, are there any kind of technology that we can take with us?
I probably sounded like a dinosaur when I said carry a paper map and a compass. It's like, well, what's that? But no, the technology we have right now for GPS in our phones and maps on our phones is just downright stunning. I mean, it's made it a lot easier for me to map trails for writing books, but it's good for hiking too, because you can download the maps to your phone when you're at home, and then even if you're out of cell service, you'll still have the maps, and the GPS function isn't dependent on the cell service. So that way you'll have a map and you'll be able to tell exactly where you are on the map. But again, if the battery dies on your phone, that's why I recommend either buying or printing a paper map. The apps that I'm familiar with that you can use on phone and computer, they all let you print the maps out at home, which is nice because you can print a custom map just for your trip and you don't have to carry a huge folding map that most of it you're not even going to need, or like the old U.S. government, U.S. Geological Survey quads. The modern tools are great. I just recommend, again, printing a map of the area and then to use your phone, make sure you've downloaded the map.
Oh, yeah, they were huge.
So you could use it offline. And another thing to consider is maybe taking a power bank. If you're doing a really long hike and you know your phone won't make it all day, use a power bank so you can charge it up. And also put it in airplane mode. That greatly extends the battery life of the phone.
Yes, great tips. And also, I was reading that there's some of those satellite locators that you can buy, like the Garmin Reach, and some other companies have similar things for people that go way in the backcountry. Those seem to be a good tool as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a very good point. There's two types of locators. One is a commercial service, like the Garmin InReach you mentioned. That's the most popular one. And that's basically a private locator service, but Garmin's a reliable company. So if you send an SOS through their device, it's going to get through. And you can also, by a paid subscription service, you can actually send and receive text messages through the device too. So if you're really doing something remote, your family or friends can track you on your trip. The other kind of locator is called a personal locator beacon, or PLB. When I fly airplanes, we legally have to have the aircraft equivalent of that in the airplane. But you could carry a little tiny one that only weighs a couple of ounces when you're hiking. You press the SOS button on that. The rescue center will know who you are and where you are within 5 minutes. A friend of mine got rescued that way one time, and it wasn't a life-threatening injury, but he couldn't walk either. So it made him a believer, and I bought mine right after that. So I don't carry one when I'm on well-traveled trails with lots of people, but if I'm in any remote area, I carry one.
Yes, that's a great idea. And as you've been hiking for so long that you mentioned, you may have some interesting experiences maybe you could share about any memorable or challenging experiences that you've had.
One of the places I've done a lot of backpacking, and I'm using the word backpacking, is the Grand Canyon. There's not a whole lot you could do in the Grand Canyon in the way of day hiking. There's not that many trails, and to get anywhere, you pretty much have to go out for multiple days. So yes, I've had some epic trips there, wading through several feet of snow after a storm dropped a lot of snow on the upper part of the canyon just to get out. This was actually a climbing trip, not technical climbing, but we were trying to climb a couple of the buttes that are non-technical, and got way behind schedule, ran out of water, and we were looking at it and spending a night without water. It was a cool evening. It wouldn't have been life-threatening, but it would have been really uncomfortable. And there were three of us. We sort of debated, should we just go ahead and bivouac here? And we can find our way down. We know what we're doing. So we did. It took us a couple of hours, but we got back to our campsite by a creek, and so we had plenty of water and a comfortable camp. So, yeah, if you hike long enough, you're going to have some epics. But in hindsight, they're fun as long as you're prepared. In this case, we'd run out of water, which is kind of a misjudgment, but we were hiking in cool weather, and we had enough warm clothing and stuff to safely spend the night. So there was nothing dangerous in our situation. We've just been a bit thirstier by the time we got back to the creek.
What is the longest hike you've been on?
Oh, that's easy. 18 days in the Grand Canyon. Years ago, a friend and I hiked a very remote section. I'm mostly trailless. We started on a trail and ended on a trail, but Grand Canyon is an unusual national park in that there aren't that many trails considering how large the park is. And that's because the early explorers and pioneers took one look at the Grand Canyon and ran away screaming. It's like, this place is ugly and there's nothing, you can't farm here. You can't do anything. A few miners built some trails, but they didn't find anything that they could actually make a profit on after they hauled it out of the canyon. So even mining kind of failed. So by the time it became a national park in 1919, there were only a couple of really well-maintained main trails. So if you want to do much hiking in the canyon, you hike out all the trails and then you quit, or you start hiking cross country. So that 18-day trip I mentioned was from the Supai Indian village in the south central part of the canyon over to the Grand Canyon Village area, the classic part of the national park. And I generally don't like trips that long because you can't carry stuff for 18 days. So we had to put out a cache of food and water partway through, which was fine. But longer trips like that, you just feel like, you live out there. That's your life now. And you just sort of forget about all the trivial civilization stuff you left behind.
That's amazing. What are some of your other personal favorite hikes that are included in this book, and what makes them special to you?
It turns out when I look through the list again, I do have some real favorites. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard, so it's a nice mix. The first one is the Mount Charleston Loop in southern Nevada. It starts in a deep canyon, and then it traverses along a ridge for 7 or 8 miles over the highest peak in the range at about 11,000 feet. So you're up above timberline with just tremendous views for hours on end. And it's a day hike. It's a long day hike. You need to be in shape for that one because it's a lot of climbing and descending, but it's all good trail the whole way. And that's just a stunning loop. And it's right outside of Las Vegas. It's very close. A little more remote, Telescope Peak in California. That's on the west side of Death Valley National Park. And that hike starts from a high trailhead and takes you up to, as the name says, Telescope Peak, which has a bit of a scramble at the end, but most people can do that. And it's the highest point in the park, I'm pretty sure. It's more than 11,000 feet above the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere. So the views down into Death Valley are amazing.
I'm in southern Utah, and of course, a lot of us run over to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and in those areas. Do you have any hikes up in our area that you recall that are in the book? Or have you hiked? Maybe they're not in the book, but have you had a chance to hike in our area?
I really like the, in Zion, my favorite hike, and I think I put it in the book. I can't remember. I could look it up, but is the East Rim Trail or the Cable Mountain Trail. It goes out of Zion Canyon to the east. A lot of people go up the trail across the canyon from it that goes to the West Rim and goes to Angel's Landing. That's spectacular too. And Angel's Landing is scary but spectacular. But a lot of people overlook the East Rim Trail that goes past some really beautiful slot canyons that are side trips, and then eventually takes you up across this huge area of just sloping sandstone up to the rim, and just an amazing view of Zion Canyon, and not nearly as popular as the trail across the canyon. On the north rim of the Grand Canyon, the Arizona Trail, which runs from Utah, well, it actually starts the Mexico border and goes north, but you can hike it anyway. So runs the length of Arizona, south to north, but a long section of it runs across the Kaibab Plateau north of the north rim of the canyon. And all the sections I've hiked of that are gorgeous, pine, fir, and aspen forest. And another nice hike in the Grand Canyon is to just walk down the upper part of the Kaibab Trail, which is the trail all the way across the canyon. But it drops down into a spectacular side canyon and goes to one of the biggest springs in the Grand Canyon called Roaring Springs. So that's a fairly long day hike if you go all the way down there and back, but you really immerse yourself in the canyon, and it's a very well maintained trail.
Well, I know I can't wait to grab a copy of your book to find all the cool places to go this summer. Do you hike year round, or do you just do it certain parts of the year?
No, that's the great thing about living in the Southwest. And Arizona is the center of the book. I guess you could kind of argue that Arizona is the heart of the Southwest. We're surrounded by southwestern states, of course, including Utah. And like Utah and California, Arizona has a lot of elevation